Welcome to the Let's Talk Sciences Declassified STEM Survival Guide podcast. My name is Audrey.
And my name is Ramir.
And the goal of this podcast is to talk about the possible career paths one can take in the field of STEM and the challenges one may face in navigating the STEM world.
In the first episode of our 6-part series, the Med Survival Guide, we will be talking about what it's like to be a pre-med student.
So just a disclaimer, the experiences of our guest today is not a reflection of all medical students who get into medical school. Everyone has different experiences, and it does not mean that you have to follow the exact path our guest took to get accepted into med school.
So if you're thinking about applying to the College of Medicine at the University of Manitoba, we did link their program admission requirements bulletin in the description of this episode for your reference for more thorough explanation from the College of Medicine at the U of M.
So our guests today include first-year med students from the College of Medicine at the Rady Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Manitoba, Amy Clark and Asif Ahmed.
Amy completed her Bachelor in Science in Biological Sciences at the U of M in 2018 and briefly attended the Faculty of Law at the U of M before being accepted into the College of Medicine.
And Asif is originally from Toronto and completed a bachelor's degree in science from Ontario Tech University. Welcome,
Yes.
Amy and Asif, to your podcast.
All right, that's correct.
How are you guys today?
Welcome.
Good.
Have you guys checked out our pharmacy podcast?
I have not, definitely, but yeah, it's something I could look at later. Yeah,
That's all right. Everybody's been busy. I guess it's the end of the semester. Audrey was absolutely great in that one.
Oh, thank you. Ramir was great too. He was quoting some
thank you
things
so
from
much.
a book that he's been reading. So.
So as I was saying earlier, Asif, you were originally from Toronto, as you have mentioned. Tell us a little bit about that and maybe the difference in, first of all, the I was going to say lifestyle as if it's like Hollywood or something, but the difference between just the city and schools, difference in schools in Toronto and here in Winnipeg.
yeah. So I've pretty much lived all my life in Toronto. I moved to Winnipeg about 5 years ago, and I found that it is quite different, especially when I first moved here. Winnipeg has a much more small town feeling, I feel, compared to Toronto, and the life seems to be a little more laid back. I know it sounds crazy to people from here, but like to me, it was a much more laid back lifestyle here,
Really?
and it was quite different at first. But now I actually feel more at home in Winnipeg than I do when I go back to Toronto. So I think I have adjusted nicely over the years.
I see.
Nice. Are you?
How long?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Are
How
you a
long have
Jets fan at all?
Oh,
Yeah, actually, I think I've never been a huge Leafs fan to begin with, so
Okay.
I would definitely, I'd probably be considered a Jets fan now.
Cool.
that's why he
Awesome.
moved, because of the Jets.
Yeah, we don't have very good sports teams, unfortunately, in Toronto.
Toronto Raptors,
Raptors, yeah.
champions.
Really? Yeah, I think over the past few years, but
Yeah.
back in the day they weren't too hot, so
That is true. That is true.
yeah, that's been my experience.
Ramir, were you going to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just asking how long you stayed in Toronto for.
I was there all my life prior to moving here.
Okay.
So yeah, just Toronto was my world before moving here. So it was nice to get a new perspective, new experience, because I've actually had a chance to travel quite a lot over the past few years, and I just realized, that Toronto is not 100% representative of all the different cities and the lifestyles which exist in Canada. So it's nice to get out of your comfort zone and go to different places, explore different things. So it's been a really nice experience for me.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of people would say, oh, I want to go to Toronto, like Uncle Tetsu or something like that. You know,
I've come across people who've actually never been to Toronto from in Manitoba. So like that just seems really strange to me. It's such a huge city. I just feel like everyone knows about it. Everyone's been there. But it's a big country, and Toronto's just one part of it. And I'm more aware of that now.
True.
It's true. All right. So Amy, Is your hometown Winnipeg?
No, it's actually not, although
Oh.
I have been in Winnipeg for quite a while now. I grew up in the town of Gillam, which is in northern Manitoba, and then
Okay.
moved down to Winnipeg when I was about 10 years old. So, as I said, been here a while now, and I feel like this is my home. But originally from Gillam, it's a small town. It's about 1,200 people. It's located kind of in between Thompson and Churchill. And it's also the home of Fox Lake Cree Nation.
Okay.
Just
Is there like a huge difference between Gillam and Winnipeg? I guess population wise too, but like the community?
Yeah, I think it is hugely different. And it was a big shock at the time moving down to Winnipeg. I remember I absolutely hated it at first. And I was quite young. I was only going into grade 6, moving to a new school, making all new friends. So it was a huge transition at the time.
Yeah, I bet.
yeah.
As from the title of our episode, Life as a Pre-Med, so was med school always the goal for you both? I don't know whoever wants to go first.
I can go. That's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
No, it actually wasn't. I actually had a career before I thought I wanted to go into the health sciences, like not medicine in particular, but I did feel like I wanted to do something related to healthcare. So I used to work trades before I went back to school to get my undergraduate degree, and then eventually end up applying for medicine. So it can be different for different people. Their trajectory and their motivation for going into medicine, it's quite variable, I found. So that's been my experience.
And I think that med school was sort of always on my radar, but it wasn't always necessarily like exactly the plan. I kind of came and went back and forth as to what it was that exactly I wanted to do throughout my whole undergrad. And I think part of it was just a lot of self-doubt about, it is a very competitive program, and I didn't know whether or not my application would actually be competitive enough to get me in. Obviously, in the end, I did push through and I got in, and I'm very grateful for that. But as you said in the introduction, I did do a year of law school, and that was because I didn't get into medicine. So it was the plan in a way, but I've strayed from the plan and ultimately ended up here where I am very happy now.
That's interesting. Wait, sorry, just to clarify, you were originally planning to get into med school, then switched to law, and then switched back?
Yeah, I never really came off of the pre-med route. But after receiving that first rejection letter after my first interview, I think I did kind of realize, okay, I need a backup plan, because there are a lot of people who apply and don't get in, and it's not a for sure thing. So it was at that point that I decided, okay, I'm going to write an LSAT and just see how this goes. And my partner at the time also was kind of trying to figure out his life trajectory. And so we studied together for an LSAT. We both got accepted, and we both did a year of law school together.
Oh, okay. And you were in law school then. So you took the LSAT. So you were in law school for a year. What made you go back to med school again?
Yeah. Okay. So medicine, it was the plan, and even when I went into law school, I continued attempting to apply to medicine. So during my first year of law, I was prepping for my medicine interview, which kind of tore my time between the two. And I wasn't sure in the end which route I was going to end up, going down. But medicine was always my first choice over law school, even while I was in law school for a year. And so when I received my acceptance into medicine at the end of my first year of law, I actually, like the same day that I received that acceptance, I sent an email to the law school saying I'm not returning, which was a crazy day, but very exciting. And I did enjoy that first year of law school. I think it was a really refreshing change from studying sciences, because I did a biology undergrad. Even high school, it was very science focused. So it was super interesting and kind of gave you a broader perspective of the world, being able to take a break from just sciences and do that year of law school. And I am happy in the end that I did that, actually. But it also reaffirmed that it probably wasn't the right path for me and that I did want to get back into the sciences.
I mean, yeah, right. It seems like, you already knew what you wanted, right? And then you're just really trying to find that way to get into it. So
Yeah.
that's great. That's great that you were able to do that.
Yeah, and I think while I was in law, we had the opportunity to go to a few different wine and cheeses before COVID hit. So I was able to talk to practicing lawyers, and although I actually did really enjoy the courses and enjoyed law school itself, it was in talking to practicing lawyers that I think I figured out that I just wasn't excited about any of the fields of practice, and that I couldn't really see myself in that job. So I was very relieved to receive my acceptance into medicine at the end of that year.
So what about for yourself, Asif? As we have talked about earlier, it's you were originally from Toronto, going to school there, grew up there, and then you moved here to Winnipeg. And you did talk about it was preferable for you in Winnipeg.
Yeah, I actually like the comparatively less hectic lifestyle here as compared to Toronto. And I think like when I was really, really young, I would prefer living in a high-paced city like that. But I think with age, I've come to prefer the more laid-back lifestyle, comparatively laid-back lifestyle we have here. And yeah, I like to call the city home now.
Makes sense. What about when it came to the medical school? Did you consider that, like Winnipeg Medical School, and then you compared two schools between two cities?
Yeah, I did consider applying there. I didn't apply in any schools in Ontario. But I do find that the application process for Winnipeg is probably the most straightforward of any schools in Canada. Like I did do my research, and just the way that things are organized here, it's much more simple, not easier, but like it's much more simple to have an understanding of what it takes to get in. So just as an example, like as compared to other schools in Canada, there is a huge emphasis on the MCAT, both pre-interview and after the interview, in terms of being offered admission into the school. So that in itself, like really simplifies things, I feel personally, because you can take a summer, study really hard, and do well on the MCAT, and you have a really good shot at getting an interview. So just that in itself, it's a huge plus for Manitoba. And again, as I said, the city itself it's really nice. I love living here. I love the lifestyle here, and so I don't really see myself wanting to go to school at any other place. So I'm quite happy here.
That's good to hear, and I definitely agree. Most students, that's what they usually do, right? They'll take courses in the winter and fall, and then they would take the summer off to study for the MCAT. And what about this? Just a classic. Why did you choose to pursue a career in medicine? So either of you guys can go for this one.
I can take it first. One of the things that I love about medicine is that the areas of practice are so broad, and that your day-to-day can look so completely different depending on what area of practice that you do go into. And I love that about it, because although I did choose medicine, I still feel like I have a huge range of options to pick from going forward. So you're not just kind of pigeonholed into one thing by choosing a program. And I guess beyond that, I knew that I wanted to do something that I found had a lot of, inherent value to me. I wanted to do something that was challenging but rewarding, something where I could continue to kind of learn and grow as a person, and medicine fit all of those things for me. And I do love science as well. I think that's kind of a requirement for going into medicine. But really, it's the application kind of that science that can be so amazingly rewarding, and that really led me into medicine. We're doing a clinical reasoning course right now, where we go through patient cases and you try and come up with a diagnosis, which is super challenging. But it also kind of reminds me of one of the reasons that I picked medicine is just the huge problem solving aspect of it that can be so interesting and so fun, and can make a huge impact on people's lives.
Okay, so I guess I'll take it from here. For me personally, it was a tough decision deciding to go into medicine as opposed to another career which I had in mind. So like I also considered really seriously considered going into pharmacy. But then when it came to medicine, the thing that I like is the interaction with patients. So that was something which really appealed to me. I did do a bit of shadowing just to see how a physician deals with the patient when they come in, and just that interaction, get a sense of get a sense of how that interaction goes. And it just really appealed to me. Like I feel that pharmacists, obviously they have a huge role which they play, but the kind of interaction with the patients that a doctor experiences and the role he plays in promoting health, that was something which appealed to me more. So I did apply to pharmacy, but then I didn't really follow through with that application in the end. Like, even though I also did not get in during my first attempt, but like, fortunately, I knew people who encouraged me and told me to keep going, that, you know, once you do get an interview, it's just a matter of luck to a large degree. Like, you can prepare for the interview, but at that point, like, you're good enough to get in. So if you don't get in, like, I would tell anyone, if you've gotten an interview and you have not got in, just keep applying, because if this is something you want to do, you really want to do, then it's just a matter of time. There is a classmate even this year who applied over half a dozen times, and they eventually got in. And that was, just reading about that was like hugely inspirational for me, that just the type of drive that people have to get in and excel in this field. It's quite amazing. So, you know, if this is something you really want to do, I would say keep trying. And just in terms of a backup plan, sure, you have a backup plan to hold you while you attempt to get into this. But if it's something you feel is your calling, then I would encourage anyone to just keep applying until you do get in.
Just hearing your both of your experiences in getting into med just shows that there's no like correct path to take. You can take any path, and you all were able to go to med school. You're all in the same place. So that's really great to hear. And it's really inspiring for our listeners too, who might be interested in going into medicine. As a pre-med, in addition to preparing for the MCAT and sort of preparing for the application process, as pre-meds, my guess is you also have to do volunteer work as well to get your references. So what organizations were you part of or involved in, and how has it helped you now as a med student?
So during my undergrad, I think that I did spread myself a little thin, and I tried to be involved in as many things as I could. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend that strategies to others. I think it's more important that you find, you know, a couple of organizations or things that you really love and commit your time to those. It'll allow you to, you know, as long as you can get your references, it's also way more interesting to talk about in the interview if it's things that you've committed, you know, a fair amount of time and you're really passionate about. Just thinking back to my undergrad, the first thing that I joined at the U of M when I started was a student group called Alpha Delta Pi. So it's actually an all-female student group, and a large focus is on raising money for charities like Ronald McDonald House. But there was also organized study groups, and it allowed me to make a lot of friends, which was really important in my first year of university. And I also took on a lot of leadership roles in that group. So I was able to snag a reference from there, which was great. And I volunteered at quite a few places, but I think two of the most important probably was Misericordia Hospital, as well as Clinic Community Health Center. So at Clinic, I was a sexual assault volunteer advocate, which meant that I was answering crisis calls and I was providing in-person support to individuals who were presenting to hospital after sexual assault. So I think that, you know, being involved in those organizations, particularly with Clinic Community Health Center, was actually hugely valuable in things like building communication skills, which is so important for medicine. In your first year, you do have to start building those skills and interviewing what are called standardized patients. So they're not real patients, they're actually actors. You have to learn how to take histories and kind of provide compassionate care and communicate effectively with your fake patients, which can be very challenging, actually. And I think that my experiences that I had, especially answering crisis calls and working with real patients in hospital, gave me that level of comfort when it came to taking those patient histories. And I think that was probably one of the more valuable things that I did, as well as gave me those 3 references that you do need to apply to medicine.
It's really interesting to hear. I actually volunteered at Misericordia too, but I was a friendly visitor. But particularly, you volunteered for the music and memory program, right?
Yeah, I did. So what I loved about that program was that you were visiting usually the same patients or people who were staying in long-term care. So you kind of got to know them, which was a lot of fun. And they have some amazing stories to tell.
Yeah. Were you able to make connections? I know at Misericordia, you were able to make connections with the residents, but there's also some difficulty when you do make that connection and then you volunteer the next day and they're no longer there anymore. How did you sort of deal with that if you did make a connection and then sometimes you just sort of lose a friend? And how did you come to terms with that?
Yeah, it was definitely challenging. A lot of the patients that I felt really connected to actually were staying in sort of interim or short-term care. So they would often get moved into long-term care homes when spots became available for them, which meant that, I didn't necessarily know where they had gone. Mm-hmm. They just kind of disappeared one day. And then as well, obviously the patients who are in long-term care, some of them did pass away while I was volunteering there. And it can be very, it can be devastating to see that happen.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what advice I can give. I think it is just kind of recognizing that it is the reality of the situation, and it's very hard to take on those volunteer roles because of that. But you do add a lot of value, and socialization is so important when you're in a place like that. So I think I was just happy that I was able to provide, even if it was just an hour once a week, mm-hmm. I was able to provide hopefully a little bit of happiness into their lives. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that as well. So Asif, you volunteered for a few years at Bridgepoint Healthcare, and you also worked for a humanitarian relief organization called Humanity First, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
What was your experience like volunteering for those organizations?
Yeah, so for me, it was an excellent experience. And this was, I used to volunteer and continued to volunteer long before I decided to go into medicine. So to me, it's a matter of doing something which you enjoy, and it really helps you to grow as a member of society, really, not just a future physician. So that's something to keep in mind. I wouldn't recommend anyone to volunteer for the purposes of getting admitted to medical school, because unless you can really speak to it based on your own personal experiences and beliefs, I don't think it really matters what you did. So just do something which you enjoy, and you've done for a long period of time, preferably. Don't just volunteer, just to get your hours in or to snag a reference letter. That would be my advice. Just do something you enjoy, and everyone has a different path, as we've discussed before. And I don't think there's any shortage of discussing personal experiences when it comes to interview, I found personally. So just do something that you enjoy. And another good thing about, from what I understand, in the medical the whole process is that they don't really look at who your reference is. They just want a person to give an idea of who you are as a person. So it doesn't matter if you volunteer at a hospital, at a relief organization, or wherever, as long as you've developed enough rapport with whoever is you're working with. The references should not really be a problem. I think it's just having something to do outside of school, which I think it's really important for your health, even just to get away from the curricular stuff, because it can get pretty hectic even in undergrad. So just do something you enjoy. Hopefully it allows you to contribute, and learn something in the process. That would be my advice. So there's no golden formula of doing something and then it helping you to get into medical school. So yeah, just do what you enjoy.
And you're helping out the community too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Just making a small contribution to the community. Yeah, it's really beneficial for everyone, I think.
It's true. My next question is it actually comes from a university student who submitted this. And they're wondering, how important do you think it is to have research experience?
So I did one summer of research in a genetics lab at the U of M. And overall, I'd say it is probably not at all important to the admissions process. And again, I came through the Manitoba applicant pool, so I only know specifically about that application. But you don't submit like a CV of everything that you were involved in. You don't have to prove that you've done any research. Most of that information kind of comes across in the interview process. And I didn't talk about the research that I did in my interview at all, because I just didn't find it very interesting, the project that I was involved in. So I knew that I couldn't talk about it in a very engaging way. I think that if you can find a project that you're super genuinely interested in, then that's great. And research does make up, a huge portion of medicine. So it would be awesome to have that experience just to find out whether that's something that you're actually interested in. But otherwise, I would say it's probably not at all necessary to do any research before applying.
All right. Good to know.
Oh, so maybe I can, in terms of research, again, like Amy, I did a couple of summers of research. I found it really enjoyable. But again, it's not necessary. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think you get a few brownie points if you have like a PhD, or maybe if some publications and stuff like that. But very few people I've come across who have done PhDs. I personally don't know anyone. I'm sure there are a couple people in the class, but I personally don't know of anyone who completed a PhD and then decided to go into medicine. So it's not really typically necessary. So just doing some summer research, if you enjoy it, again, as Amy said, if you find something which is enjoyable to you and you do it over the summer, then it's great. It's a great experience. For me, it was really fun. I enjoyed doing research. And there are opportunities, obviously, within medical school once you do get in to conduct research. So if that's something you truly enjoy doing, then by all means, go for it. But it's, again, not necessary for getting admitted, and it doesn't really give you a leg up unless you have a number of publications or a PhD and things like that. So
I think also research, like participating in research, is similar to how, when you volunteer, you just get, it's more for the experience and actually for fun, essentially, right? It's something you enjoy. And then that could be later on, as you said, if you're really passionate about it, it could help you perhaps in the interviews. But yeah, like you said, it's not a very,
Not
it's
necessary.
not essential. Yeah, it's not it. So that being said, I'd like to know about how the medical application process was like for yourself. Of course, it may change, but when you were taking it, how was it structured? You can feel free to talk about the MCAT, or right now we have Casper. I'm not sure if they had Casper before already when you took it.
I guess the first thing to know is that it is a long process. I think it takes, 9-10 months from beginning to end. So I can talk you through just sort of what a typical application cycle would look like. The last MCAT sitting is usually around, August, September. And then you have to submit your application by October 1st is usually the date. And by then you actually may or may not even know what your MCAT score was if you had opted for a later MCAT sitting. So you just kind of hope you did well and apply anyway. And then after that, you do have to write the CASPER, which is a situational judgment test. So I think the last sitting for those is in October as well. And then interview offers go out in January. So at that point, once you received your interview offer, you would submit your 3 references and start doing some serious interview prep, because the interviews are in February and March. So you'd have a couple of months there if you hadn't already been focusing on preparing. And then hopefully by May, you receive your acceptance letter. So it is a bit of a long process, but definitely worth it.
Yeah, and again, I agree. It's a long process. The applications start early, and the fact that you don't even get your score back, like that was the case for me. You don't get your score back until after you submit your application, which can be unnerving, I think, for a lot of people. But I think it's important to realize that it is a long process, and just not think about it on a day-to-day basis. Just go about your life, do what needs to be done, and just do your best, and not try to dwell on the small things too much. In terms of CASPER, that has been introduced in the past couple of years, I think. But it's not really that tough of an exam. Like, it's not like the MCAT or anything like that. I personally was told by a friend just to consider it as a typed interview, basically. So the types of questions and the scenarios that are presented are very similar to what you could expect on the MMI. It's just that you're typing out your answers, and it's a timed test. So it's not something which you should be worried sick about. I didn't find it to be a very tough experience writing the CASPER. Another thing I would add about the CASPER is there's a lot of companies out there who apparently know the inside scoop or whatever of how to do well in the CASPER. So just don't get caught up. Would be my advice in the advertising and all that kind of stuff. It's not a very tough exam. Just try to relax. Maybe look at a couple of the questions. They actually have those on the CASPER website. So these are the people who actually administered the exam. They do have a few practice scenarios. Just look at those. Maybe type out an answer or two just to get an idea, get familiarized with the exam. And it is obviously another layer which has been added to the application process, but it's overall not that bad. So just try to take it day by day. Don't fret over it, on a daily basis. Do what needs to be done, and in the end, hopefully, it works out for you.
I would definitely second that. Preparing for the CASPER, I think, is somewhat similar to the interview. If you do want to do prep, personally, I actually chose not to, because I found that in digging through stuff online, you found all these sort of perfect canned answers, but they may not be perfect, and you don't know what they're actually looking for. And I didn't want my answers to sound the same as everybody else's and come off too formulated. So I actually chose not to do any prep for the CASPER other than familiarizing myself with what the exam looked like.
And from what I heard, it's actually, like you said, it's very tough to prepare for it, because it's not like the MCAT where you can study, right? Like sciences. I heard it's more critical thinking. That's what they're trying to get at. Right.
Or personality tests, sort of.
Personality,
yeah. I think more than critical thinking, it's just they try to get an idea of non-cognitive abilities, from what I understand. So it's actually you're just supposed to it's more about professionalism and how you would act in this given scenario. So yeah, I would even err on the side of not thinking of it as a test, just an outline of what you would do in a given scenario, and just be honest. And just having an original answer. I personally feel like that probably serves you better than, as Amy said, having the perfect answer, quote unquote. So you just try to be honest, and I don't think a lot of people do very, very poorly on that. Like that's just my guess. Like it's really hard to do poorly unless someone has no common sense. Basically, it's hard to really do poorly on this test. I would feel. So don't stress about it too much. Just be familiar with what the test is like, and that's pretty much all you need to do, I feel.
Okay, we actually had that question from a grade 11 student named Ray Lee Torino. So that's what she asked is what is the MCAT and Casper test? So I think we've talked about the Casper a lot. Maybe perhaps you can go more in detail about the MCAT. Perhaps what was the toughest part of it for you, or how did you prepare for it?
So I could go first if you. So for me, yeah. So the MCAT, it's basically a critical thinking, problem solving type of test, and it just requires a knowledge base in the sciences, and just the ability to think critically and problem solve, as I said. So it's when I took the MCAT, the first thing for me was it's nothing like any other test which I've taken in high school or undergrad ever. It's a completely different test. But then the other thing is it's not quite as much content based. So if you take the test, you do your practice. That's how you develop the skills to do better on it. So it's very unintuitive for someone, I would imagine, who are in their undergrad right now, because the content in your undergrad science degrees is more focused on the topics and just basically memorizing and just taking the test afterwards. You can't do that for the MCAT. Even if you have like perfect scores in your undergrad courses, you still need to prepare over an extended period of time just to develop the kind of skills necessary. So I personally would say I spent over 80% of the time actually doing practice problems and taking practice tests, and then maybe like 20% of my time over 4 months actually doing content review. So there is content which you have to go over, but it's more a matter of getting familiarized with the test and how they ask questions and just to think critically. And one section a lot of people typically tend to struggle on is CARS, critical analysis and reasoning skills. So that again, it's just I used to do practice passages every single day over the course of 4 months, and just for me the challenge was to read fast enough because it is a time test. So I found, like, for me personally, for example, like I read kind of slower, so you do have to develop your reading speed and things like that, and then just practice. And it's not really a terrible difficult test, I found, in the end, as long as you approach it the right way and you give it enough time. So I hope that sheds some light on it.
Yeah, me too, actually. I find that I'm a very slow reader. And when it comes to eating too, like I'm a slow eater. I don't know I'm just slow. I don't know. What about for yourself, Amy?
So I wrote the MCAT a couple of times and kind of changed the way I was studying. And I think that made a huge difference. I ended up bumping my score up by like 12 points, I think, which actually made a huge difference. So I didn't use any prep, like the prep company, like classes and things you can buy. They're really expensive. In my opinion, I don't think they're worth it. Some might feel that they need it, and that's okay. I think everybody's a little different, but I used the Princeton review books. So each time I wrote the MCAT, I did read through like all of the books to refamiliarize myself with all like the biology, the biochem, the physics and everything. But I don't think that that's super valuable. It's very time consuming, and it's a lot of passive learning that doesn't actually teach you how to attack the problems when you reach the actual test. So, I would probably recommend getting the books, go through them once if you're not feeling confident about sort of the basic concepts, but don't get bogged down in the details. Try and move on to the more active learning as quickly as you can. So start doing practice tests, start doing flashcards, and things like that, where it's active recall and it's actively problem solving, because that will serve you a lot more when it comes to actually writing the MCAT. I also, one of the things that I did the last time that I wrote my MCAT that I think made a huge difference, and the one thing I think was worth the money, was a subscription to UWorld, which it's an online, it's a website, and you just buy a subscription, and then they give you like 1,000,001 practice questions on all the different areas, all the different sections that are on the MCAT. And then as well as buying the like official AAMC, which is the company that puts out the MCAT, buy their official practice exams. That was also very helpful for me, because it gives you the realistic sense of what that exam will be like. And you can kind of work up to doing those exams under like actual timed exam conditions, so that when it comes to the day of the exam, you're not figuring it out for the first time. You're kind of used to being able to write an exam during those very short, well, it's a long exam, but it feels like each question, you have to be able to do it very quickly.
Yeah. And again, like as Amy said, like it is a long exam, and it does take practice, not just to write the exam questions, but just to have the focus to complete the exam. It's almost like 7.5 hours, including the breaks, which is a really, really long exam. And I didn't mention as Amy's saying, like the AAMC, it's actually vital, I feel, to get an idea of what the exam questions are actually like. So it is worth the investment to get those AAMC practice tests and I think it's test banks or question banks. Like they have the really, really similar questions, and they're quite tough. So you just a lot of the questions I found, which I found on the MCAT, the actual test was actually easier than the questions on the section banks. So just go over those. Try to go over each question after you do a test, and even the ones that you get right, just so you can see the logic behind a particular answer. Like I think on test day, it's good if you do get the question right by luck, but when you're studying, it's worth going through every single question, the ones you get right, the ones you get wrong. And that really, I think, really hammers those tough points and ultimately helps you to do well on the test.
Thank you for your responses to that question. In addition to preparing for the MCAT and also Casper, as a pre-med, you're also an undergrad student trying to study for your courses, because your GPA is also important as well. What were your feelings toward pre-med courses, like your undergrad courses? And are there any courses you're required to take in order to get into med school?
So as far as I know, there are no longer any actual required courses. I think biochemistry used to be required, but is no longer. They are really looking for a diverse pool of students. So they want students from, any and all backgrounds, which I think is one of the reasons that they remove the requirement for certain courses like biochemistry.
And again, like I would agree with what Amy said. There are no hard requirements per se, but in order to, I think, do well on the MCAT and to have the necessary knowledge base, I think you do require courses like at least introductory biology, so bio 1 and 2 in first year. Organic chemistry definitely helps, and then biochemistry, I think, was really, really helpful for me personally. I found like my particular exam. It was quite biochem heavy, so it is definitely worth having at least a 3-credit course in biochemistry. I found that really, really helpful. And then in addition to that, I think maybe a course in statistics could help, and an introductory psychology, sociology course. That would be pretty helpful for the psychology, sociology section of the exam, obviously. It's like we don't really have any hard prereqs, but I think people end up doing these courses just so they can actually prepare for the MCAT, which I think would be pretty hard to do without having these courses. So I would definitely suggest having these courses if they're not part of your program, because it makes studying much easier.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think if you're, just starting university, know that you want to go into medicine. I think taking a science degree would serve you very well and make your MCAT prep a lot easier. But if you're not a science student and you're studying something else, don't feel like that disqualifies you, because there are no required courses. It'll just mean a bit more prep on your part to try and learn all those courses on your own.
All right. It's good advice. I guess, what was your favorite course during undergrad and why?
My favorite course was one that I took in my very last year of my undergrad. It was actually a philosophy course called Ethics in Biomedicine. At the time, it was taught by Professor Arthur Schaefer, and he used to be the head of the section of biomedical ethics in the Faculty of Medicine. He's just an absolutely brilliant human being. And if you come across any courses that he does teach, I would definitely recommend them. It was the most interesting course that I took in my whole undergrad. And actually, I think it was very, very useful in understanding sort of those basic ethics concepts that are important for the interview as well.
Yeah, so for me, it's a tough choice, but I think for me, my favorite course I would have to say was biochemistry. Like I even though I only took like an introductory course for a couple semesters, like it actually I considered going into a biochemistry major just because I enjoyed the course so much, and I wish that I would have known that I would enjoy it so much, so I could have done this as my my undergrad program, but. That was my favorite course, and I think it's pretty applicable to medicine. So, yeah, it was good fun.
That's pretty interesting, Amy. So you said your favorite course in undergrad was a philosophy course.
Yeah, it was.
Are you particularly interested in just philosophy itself, like in general?
I took intro to philosophy, and then I took this ethics and biomedicine course. But those were the only philosophy courses that I took. Everything else was very science oriented. But they were just so interesting and a bit different from, learning about biology and physics and that kind of thing. So it was really engaging.
For your intro course, did you guys read the book of Plato? Are you familiar with that?
No, I don't think we did.
Are you aware of the Book of Plato?
I am, but I can't say that I know a lot about it.
Me too. What from what you've read from the Book of Plato, give us a little bit of a summary. I don't know. I feel like it'll be interesting because considering you what I'm trying to say is you don't really have to be, into the sciences or all the sciences. You can be into many things. So for example, for yourself, you're into philosophy, right? So, and how would you say that taking that philosophy course helped in your overall, for maybe your MCAT test or your being in med school? Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it helped for the MCAT, because the MCAT doesn't really require any knowledge around ethical decision making, but a lot of the questions that you will get on the MMI, which is the multiple mini interview, are very ethics based. So taking that course was certainly helpful for that. I also read the book Doing Right, which for a lot of people is like the golden book to read for the interview. I don't know if it's necessarily true or not, but I know a lot of people do read that book in particular, which is all about ethics in particular to medicine.
Thank you. I was actually waiting for that. See, now you gave me a book recommendation. I can just read that after right now. So now I'd like to speak about the elephant in the room, as you could say. Obviously, we are in a Zoom meeting right now, and I would definitely have preferred, if it was in person, it would have been more fun and stuff.
Yeah.
But we are in a pandemic, as we know. And I think for me personally, when it first started switching university courses into online, I particularly struggled in adjusting to, the new ways of learning. Everything is virtual, Zoom meetings. Although I didn't have to bus an hour and 30 there, hour 30 back, I felt like I was not able to focus so much when I'm at home. Uh, did you guys ever have, you know, any challenges that the pandemic caused in terms of academics or in life in general?
Yeah, like obviously it's been challenging for everyone for a host of different reasons. For me, obviously it's the fact that, I'm used to going to school, sitting in the lecture hall. It has its own atmosphere, which I think it has been shown obviously over such a long period of time to be conducive to learning, and Zoom really does take away from that experience. So that is very, very unfortunate. But I think for me, it's just a matter of developing a routine and trying to stick to it. That really helps to keep me more or less on track. The other thing is just to get in some physical activity, whether it's going for a workout or if all the gyms and everything is closed, then even going for a walk. That really helps. It just, it helps you to clear your mind, and, you become refreshed and just go about your, whatever you have to do after that. It just makes things a lot easier. So I make it a point, no matter how busy it is, to, go for a hike at least every couple of days. So I'll go for a 5-6 kilometer hike. I live in a nice area, and in the evening, there's not a lot of people out. So, just go outside, clear your mind, have some physical activity, and just try to have a routine. And I think it makes things a lot easier, because it can be tough to develop a routine when you don't have to go out. Sometimes, you can attend your lectures while you're still in bed. So that, for the first couple of weeks, it's really nice. But after a while, I think it just, it really does hamper your productivity. So
Let me tell you right now, that's a very good point. I do that. I tried not to do that, and then now that's all I do. Like I'll just be laying down in bed with my laptop open, and then I'd fall asleep. It's so easy to fall asleep.
So
And
easy, yeah.
it's so interesting that you mentioned that being in lecture actually, what did you say, conducive?
Yeah, conducive to learning. Like it's just something we've been socialized to do, from high school to undergrad and now medical school. That's where you go. That's where you learn. It's just, even that, the sight of a teacher at the front of the room teaching, that just gets you focused and orientated, and that can be lacking in a Zoom environment. So
I absolutely agree. I think I just want to mention I watched this lecture by Marty Lobdell. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him, but he did talk about how to study less but study smart.
Mhm.
And he did mention there that when he compared, like, if you were in a classroom, you would be more, focused, because there's the teacher presence. For example, when they ask you a question, since you're in a classroom, you're used to raising your hand, right? But if you're in a Zoom meeting, your camera is off, nobody really knows what you're doing, and you don't really have to participate. So yeah, I just like the fact that you mentioned that. What about for yourself, Amy?
Yeah, so when the pandemic hit, I was just finishing up my first year of law school. So we missed the last sort of month or two of that. And then that was my first experience writing exams from home, which went okay. And I think at the time it was still kind of, unique and interesting, to be able to work from home and do exams at home. But doing medicine from home has not been a very fun experience for me. There's definitely a lot of Zoom fatigue going on. I don't feel near as engaged with the classes. I think, just as Asif was saying, there is something about that environment of actually being able to go to class, pick up a coffee with a friend, sit, the chit chat before class starts actually is very, very valuable. And then as well, the other aspect that we've totally lost out on this past year is being able to socialize and get to know our classmates. We have had some things in person, like clinical skills, as well as some labs, which is great because it gives you a little bit of an opportunity to kind of put faces to names. But forming those connections, I think, has really been lost for our class. And I'm hoping that next year we'll have a bit more of a normal experience.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it. it's really hard not to see your friends in person. For me, when at uni, my friends were like my family away from home, and so I feel like I'm away from my family. But yeah, the pandemic has been really tough.
Yeah, I think it leaves you feeling very disconnected and alone, which can be really difficult when you're, entering a new program and kind of everything is new. And it is a pretty intense and fast-paced program. So it is important to have that support system around you. And I think that's missing for a lot of people.
All right. I'd just like to ask a question that most young students, I know I had this question when I first started university, where I compared myself to others. Sometimes I still, can't help it. I still do that now. I see other people getting accepted to their programs, but pre-med is different, right? You're getting a degree, and it's not like the program is that you're trying to get into is so much further down the road compared to most other programs. What would you say to those students who feel like they may not be enough, or they're not worth it, or maybe it's discouraging for them?
Yeah, I would say, like, again, it's I can't force someone to think a certain way. You do have to. Everyone has their own journey and their own experiences, but if this is your calling, there's you can absolutely make it in this, and just take it day by day, step by step. Don't think too far ahead. Just think in the immediate term, because like once I am in medical school, there's so much to do before I actually go on and become a practicing physician. So like even I have to, force myself not to think too far ahead, just take it step by step, and just think of it as a journey. Uh, don't be overcritical of yourself, because we do fail along the way. So just as an example, I think Amy mentioned having to reapply. I personally reapplied before I got in. So even getting in, like it can take a toll on you if, once you see that rejection. But it's just a matter of just not trying to get bogged down, and having some sort of social support, be it through family, peers, someone who's there to support you, to listen to your concerns. That really helps. And yeah, just take it piece by piece, day by day. Don't be overcritical of yourself. Try to improve. And there's people with different abilities, different strengths, different weaknesses in our medical class. Like, unfortunately, we haven't really had a time to socialize as much as we would have liked, but I have talked to at least a couple of classmates, and they've discussed their personal struggles with me. I've had my struggles in life. So it's just a matter of supporting each other, not being too harsh on ourselves or our peers. And I think that really helps to get us farther than, just being overly critical of ourselves. So take it easy on yourself. Take it day by day. Have a plan. Try to stick to it. If things don't work out, don't be overly harsh. And just go from there.
Good advice.
For myself, I think this question definitely hits pretty close to home, because I very often compare myself to others. Definitely during my undergrad, I compared myself, to friends or acquaintances that I knew that got accepted into medicine when I wasn't, and that was extremely difficult. I even compared myself to people who had applied for other programs and had gotten in. And you always imagine that they're so much happier now that they're in a program. I think in part that's not necessarily true. I mean, it is an amazing experience to get into that program, and I was incredibly happy, but it doesn't mean that suddenly all your life problems are solved or anything like that. And in part, it is really hard not to compare yourself to others and not to be too cliche about it. But I do think the key is really to compare yourself to, yourself today to yourself a month ago or a year ago or 5 years ago, and just realize how far you really have come over that time. And that everybody is on their own timeline. Some people may have got into medicine, after 3 years of university, which is amazing. Other people get in after 10 years. Other people have an entire career and a life and start a family and then decide that they want to go into medicine, and that's okay too. And we have people from all of those different backgrounds in our class. So don't put yourself on some kind of artificial timeline.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I like the fact that you said that everyone is on their own timeline. And yeah, that's true. Everyone is on their own journeys, and you shouldn't compare yourself to another person's journey because your journey is different. With that being said, as a pre-med, what did you do during the application process that made you stand out?
I actually don't think I really tried to do anything just with the goal of standing out. I think if people, if you're doing something productive, anything at all, that makes you stand out. That's my personal belief. So there's no golden formula. I know people tend to do a lot of different things. And I can't see anything which really made me stand out per se. It's just having personal experiences, being honest with myself, and being honest at the interview. I think that actually helped me stand out. That's pretty much it. Like, I think we all have unique experiences, and just doing a bit of introspection, looking back at yourself, you're looking back on your experiences and being able to describe them in a meaningful way. That's pretty much all I recommend in a person, quote unquote, standing out.
I don't know for sure what changed between my unsuccessful applications and my final application, which was successful. But I think I can try and speculate on some of the things that I had changed along the way. So the first thing was that I rewrote my MCAT and bumped up my score quite a bit, which never hurts. And then the second big piece, I think, is how you come across in the interview. So I think that I did stand out on my last application sort of inadvertently, because I was in law school at the time and I was able to share that experience with quite a few of the interviewers, and they were always very curious about that journey and how I ended up there and why I was interested in medicine. So I think, inadvertently, as I said, that kind of made me stand out as different from the other applicants. Whether or not it made a difference, I don't know for sure. And as Asif had said, I did spend more time reflecting back on my experiences from work and from volunteering. And I wrote out some of those stories that I wanted to tell during the interview. So you'll find that the questions they ask during the MMI, they don't always seem personal, but I did really make it a priority at every station to talk about myself and some of the experiences that I had in a way that related to the question. And I think that did make a huge difference.
That is very good to hear. And it's a pretty, it's kind of a consistent concept that, it's not one fits all, right? So it's different each time. And so now I'd just like to do a little, this is more improv actually. We didn't plan this out. This is just rapid fire questions.
Rapid fire.
Yeah, straight from the dome. So we can start with Asif first. Actually, yeah, we'll just do that and then you guys can alternate. And then Asif, you can answer first. So during undergrad, what would you say was your absolute kryptonite, like your worst nightmare course?
Oh, I would have to say stats, hands down. Brutal and boring for me, but it's something which had to be done. So,
but it's good you took it though. What about for yourself, Amy?
For mine, it was biochemistry, which is funny because clearly some people loved it, but I did not. I struggled with it a lot.
Pathways.
Oh,
it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
I'm about to take that, so just
try,
don't spoil anything.
Okay.
All right, next question. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being easy. Okay, let's do 1 to 10. 10 being easy. How hard was the MCAT for you guys?
I would say about a 4.
I would say, yeah, maybe it's hard to rate it. I guess like a 2 or 3. I struggled quite a bit with it and I did have to rewrite it a couple of times. I think the hardest part is figuring out the right study strategy that actually works.
I just realized I just answered that question really kind of messed up backwards.
Kind of backwards, but that's okay.
What about first year of med school now that you're first year? So from 1 to 10, 10 being the hardest and then 1 being the easiest.
I would say at least, I would say 2. It's been pretty tough for me.
Is 10 easy or is 10 hard now?
Oh, sorry. 10 is hard now.
Oh, okay, then a 9.
Okay.
Or a 9 then.
Yeah, I'd put it at a 9 too. And I think it's been extra difficult, just the fact that it's been over Zoom and you haven't been able to like form as many connections as you normally would.
I think that's a big thing. What about this? Last question for the rapid fire. What would you say your best strength that helps you the most in med school right now?
I think resilience. I'm okay with failing as long as I know how to get back up on my feet and move on. That's been the biggest strength.
Wow, that was a great answer. I was going to say communication skills just because I had learned so much from my experience doing answering crisis calls and things like that. And I think it has served me really well.
Both are very, very
Great
good traits
answers.
regardless. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Ramir, for improving on that rapid fire question segment. So we're actually on our last question. And we like to ask this question near the end of every episode. Most of our listeners are high school students, some are university students. And is there any advice for our listeners that you can tell them about if they're considering pursuing a career in medicine or maybe just in healthcare in general, or if they're passionate about something? What advice can you give them to stay motivated and not give up on their dream?
Yeah, I would just say, don't get caught up in the hype of, something being competitive or uncompetitive. If you want to do something, you can definitely do it. And try to enjoy your life, especially the kids in high school. Like, try to enjoy your life, make the most of it, socialize, be with your family, be with your friends. And yeah, you do need to spend time studying, but don't put the other things off for later, because I think it's really important, especially as a young person, to enjoy your life above and beyond everything else, because things can happen later on in life whenever. But don't waste your younger years worrying. Just do what you enjoy and things will work out, I think, in the end.
I can totally agree with that. I would also say try and explore lots of careers, then find out if medicine really is the path for you. It is an amazing journey, but it's also incredibly challenging, and we're only in our first year. So make sure that it is really what you want to do and find out as much about it as you can, but don't narrow yourself right away to the one career. I think exploring lots of careers is a good idea. And definitely, as Asif had said, enjoy high school, enjoy your undergrad years. I loved mine. And life only gets busier from there. Join groups that genuinely interest you. Don't just join things because you're looking for a reference or because you want it on, your resume. It's really not worth it. Try and make lots of friends in university and get the most out of that time. And I didn't take the most direct route. I failed a course at one point. I dropped out of several others. And I absolutely loved those years, even though, I had my challenges. It's not a race. Medical school will be here when and if it is the right path for you. So make sure that you find time to enjoy the things that you love while you have the time for them. The other thing I would say is, once you know what it is that you want to do, try and find yourself a mentor. I think that can be really valuable. So if you are interested in medicine and you have friends or acquaintances in medicine, reach out to them for guidance. And if you don't, that's okay too. There are mentorship programs. I'm actually part of Rady Faculty of Health Sciences Community Mentorship Program. So if you can remember that name, you can Google it. They have social media and they will actually connect you with a mentor in the program.
That's really great advice. I didn't know there was a mentorship program, so that's really interesting. So our listeners...
I think it's great for people who don't necessarily have those connections on their own, because it does give you a little bit of a leg up to have that insider scoop.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I think that should bring us to our conclusion of our interview. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just want to thank both of you for sharing your experiences and giving really great advice. And I think it'll be very valuable for our listeners to hear about. And also taking the time to just spending time with us on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, true. And with the technical difficulties and stuff.
Yeah, technical difficulties at the start. But yeah, so thank you so much, Amy and Asif, for being on our first episode of our second podcast series, the Med Survival Guide. Season 2, yeah. We're in season 2. And thank you to our listeners for listening. Just remember to follow us at LTS_U of M on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook to be updated on our upcoming events. Also, feel free to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. We're pretty much everywhere on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and more.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a good day. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
On the next episode.
There's this book by Joe Navarro. He's like an ex FBI agent, I think. Yeah, ex FBI agent. It's about reading body language.
Yeah, for me, I think before going to M, I read a book called Being Mortal. But sorry, I can't pronounce the name. So
I'm reading it right now.
Yeah, that book.
Yeah.
I read.
So that's the big one in the MMI. Like, you're gonna be stressing out and just gonna be wasting time being like, paralyzed by fear. And like, I'm not saying that's particularly a bad thing, but there's ways to address that in a more wise way. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of philosophy has to do with words. You know what I'm saying? Like, so even philosophy states that words are kind of overrated. Some philosophers at least. But like, meditation for me and like other ways of being is like a way of understanding the world without words. So without words and judgments and thoughts. So that's how I would best put it. The difference between the two.
Wow.
Wow.
That's it for the episode, guys.